Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach and welcome to another video. Very close to the season opener now. It's very exciting. Absolutely can't wait for it all kick off. It does get to that point where you go, gee, footy's not too far off. I'm pretty keen. And then in the weeks and then days leading up, you just get an absolute appetite. And that's about where I'm at the minute. But like I did with the defenders the other day, I went through everyone who I felt was relevant and pretty much everyone who the community feels is relevant. I went via the ownership, even if there was just a few percent, I thought it was probably worth covering off because someone's interested. So I thought, given the fact that you just can't get to every player that you'd like to profile, and sometimes you don't mention absolutely everyone, but there is a bit of a need to discuss them in the broader scheme of things, I thought this sort of video can be your one-stop shop, and I'll be doing those for the defence as I have done, forward line, midfield, and probably touch on in a bit of a shorter format the ruck. I've discussed it thoroughly in other videos, and there's a few less options to really delve into. It's simple, but it's tricky, but that's a decision for another day. So I'm going to go through every player that has a bit of relevancy attached to them and give you my thoughts. Some might be in 10 or 15 seconds. Others I might go on a bit of a tangent. We'll see how we go. Paddy Dangerfield off the top. This is clearly a 10 to 15 second one. He is in 69% of sides, and rightfully so. He's an absolute lock. Just a guy that you simply have to have. So get him in your side and build the forward line around him. Hawkins, not much interest, rightfully so. Westhoff, I feel the interest of the 13% would be in the ruck department. For what it's worth, I feel his average is definitely going to drop with his change in role. Had a career best season points-wise and probably career-wise because of that, I guess, the exposure to the ruck. And he's not going to get that this time around. So I anticipate him going back to more your high 80s, early 90s of an average. Lance Franklin in just the 3% of sides, surely one of the lower ownerships for Buddy in years gone by. But it's with good reason. The fact is that he has had a pretty poor pre-season. So no JLT games, and I think it was some form of surgery. I want to say shoulder, I'm not too sure. But at his age, we really do need him to be having good pre-seasons to give us that confidence. Because as good as he has been, the fact is at some point in time his numbers will dip. Credit where credit's due. I probably thought those numbers would dip in the certainly last 12 months. They did not. But there's a big risk in starting Franklin because there's nothing wrong with upgrading to him. And he may even start the season slow, given he has had an interrupted pre-season. Sam Menegola, 4% of sides and a really nice point of difference, I feel. Geelong is going to have a different sort of a shape to its midfield, and while Menegola has been looked upon as a type of player who is half forward flank and works into the middle, I think we're going to see a lot more midfield time from him. Ablett's going forward, Selwood more to a wing back flank. Don't get me wrong, the Holy Trinity will get a go regularly in the centre bounce, but certainly nowhere near like they did last year. And the likes of Menegola and Kelly and Parfitt will get much more of a look. So I think if you're looking for a point of difference, he's not a bad option. It's probably not going to come in 90s and 100s. He is the sort of guy who is more your 80 and then 120. But if you've got some patience, he'll reward you with some big scores. Devon Smith, 18% of sides, and fair enough too. He was outstanding last season, served me and others very well. Just a tackling machine. Only had to get it 20-odd times. But when you're laying 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tackles, you're going to produce an average near on 100, which that's what we got, 97.9. I haven't started with him, and I actually haven't really considered him. And it's interesting as to why. There's just something that hasn't appealed to me. It's a bit of a gut feel call. I just feel that last year was this perfect recipe of a new club, and he was fully fit and he was looking outstanding, rising to the occasion. Can he produce that and replicate that again? Probably can. I'm just casting a little bit of doubt because he is somewhat unproven. I know last year, and I think he's averaged 92 before, but I don't know. There was just something that I just felt, look, unbelievable season following a fresh change and a clean slate. I just didn't want to start him, but I can understand if you're going to, because it doesn't matter how your team's playing, you can tackle at any time. So he's pretty safe in terms of getting those tackling points. Tom McDonald, just a couple of percent of size. I don't think we should be going with him. Isaac Heeney, Dangerfield and Heeney, they're locks. He's going to get more midfield time. Looks absolutely shredded. He looks in outstanding nick, and he's in 44% of teams. So get around him, no doubt. Robbie Gray, 10% of sides. Now, he's a guy that has served us very, very well in years gone by, but his best seasons have been through the midfield, and I'll just try and get some averages up of years gone by. Now, I know the stats and games may say otherwise, but I always feel as if he's a flight risk in terms of his injury. And I know he's had an interruption already throughout the pre-season, but 111 and 110.4, then 108.1, 2014 to 2016. Last 2 years, 91.7, 96.8. It's a no from me. I just think there's a lot more chance that he goes down in average. He's 31. His body hasn't been great even at the best of times, and I feel that he's the type of guy that could go down at any moment. And I just wonder exactly how much midfield time he'll get. I know he can play great footy and dominate games in attack, but just concerns me with his age, certain parts of his history. I just couldn't go with him myself, but I could be proven wrong. And we'll skip by a couple. David Mundy's in 2% of sides, but I don't think he's the worst choice, believe it or not. I think it's a know what you're going to get sort of factor. I think we could be pretty confident with an average of 93 to 97. If that's enough, then great. If it's not, look elsewhere. But I think the fact that a midfield opportunity has opened up, and I think he's just going to be reliable as hell. He's not going to come out and average 3 figures, but equally, he's not going to go pear-shaped. I think he's a pretty rock-solid option. So, a bit of a safe bet. Dunkley, 11% of sides at 516k. We saw the outstanding end to last season. He was absolutely dominant, up there with the very best scorers in that period of time. Can he recapture that? Liberatore's influence, how will it affect it? He gave a real interesting JLT. Week 1, Libba seemed to be absorbing some of those centre bounce attendances and stoppage areas, and all of a sudden we seem to put a line through him, and then responds in JLT 2. Oh, gosh, I just feel like the Dogs are so hard to get a read on every sort of level. The team, certain individuals, where are their best positions? I just don't know. And for that reason, I just think he's a tad too risky. Look, McLean's right beneath him in the pricing. If you wanted to pick one, I think Dunkley's your man. My opinion on that has changed through the pre-season. I started the pre-season believing McLean may have been the man, but he seems to be reverting to a bit more forward time, certainly less midfield time. At least what the JLT is telling us, he is being hurt by other players coming into that domain. So I feel as if Dunkley is a risk, one that could pay off. Are we going to see the sort of footy that we saw in the back end of last year? Is he going to get that sort of exposure to the midfield? If you're confident, it could reap you some beautiful rewards. I'm not confident enough, but by all means, if you want to go with it, all the best. And McLean, I think we've got to put a line through. I've seen his ownership be around 15% at the best of times, I think, this year. It's now down to 4, and that's off the back of a poor JLT series and the clear impact that Libba is having on his game. So it's got to be a no. Tim Kelly, I really like. He's in my team. He's in 14% of sides. And conversely to McLean, he's started at around 6 to 7% and has risen gradually through the pre-season. A good JLT 2, which I think gave people the confidence after a semi-quiet one first up. But what I love about this selection is there's no real concern. Well, there is no concern about where he will play. I feel like the discussion so often with forwards is if they can get that midfield time. Yes, players can score from the forward line, but the forward line position can fluctuate more. Hence, we want them playing in the middle. That's where the best scorers are. It's where the most points are available. So if we can get forwards who are playing midfield, it's beautiful. Kelly's going to be there. There's no doubt about it. Dangerfield, Duncan and Kelly will be used in the midfield the most for Geelong. Now, I say that as a Cats man, so take it on board. You can be confident in what Kelly is going to get in terms of position. Of course, he's a bloke who hasn't played much AFL footy. It's only his second season, and he wants to go home. So there's a lot of factors there that might sway you to the negative, but it didn't seem to worry him too much, and the noise was there a little bit last year. So let's hope for SuperCoach and Geelong's sake that he can produce a good season. Jack Riewoldt's in 5% of sides. I can only presume some people are thinking that he'll have some sort of rise in numbers given Lynch will shoulder the load. I don't see it happening, and I just could not see any real positivity in picking Jack. I just think I see it as more of an unknown factor. He's a key forward. I don't see him being a genuine option for our forward lines. So it's quite simply a no. Mitch Wallis, 2% of sides, not the worst POD. I wouldn't outrageously encourage it, but I think he's a guy that, I wouldn't be surprised if he's around the mid-90s by year's end. Then we can scroll through a couple. Wingard's still in 3% of sides, obviously concerns over the body. Walter's in 3% of sides. Yeah, look, there has definitely been times where I've thought about him this pre-season, and I've done a profile on him and I've talked about him a bit. His upside is huge, but the fact is he's just hurt us so many times in so many different ways. Poor form, ill discipline, injury. He ticks every box in almost every category. He's got the talent, he's got the X factor, he's got the ability to play forward and mid. But on the other hand, all those things I said in terms of the negative category, gee, you'd be brave to go with him, and I could not. Jordan DeGoey, 9% of teams. I think that's too high for a guy that we haven't seen. I know he's super exciting, but let me just get his numbers up. He's been a bit all duck or no dinner. I know it's a bit sexy to get around him because he kicked those amazing goals in the grand final and he looks like this unbelievable game changer. But I still think he's a bit too permanent forward for my liking. And when he's on, you're going to get a 130. But I fear that there's just going to be too many low ones. Now, we saw an increase from 79 to near on 88 in his points last year. But let me just go through some scores. Let's round 7 after an interrupted start to the season, 123. That was after a few substandard games. 123, 92, 111, 65, 63, 139, 88, 64, 117, 73, 147, 82, 76, 51. Then into the finals, 56, 101, 82, 68. Now, we saw some ripping goals. Clearly didn't equate to unbelievable SuperCoach stuff. He only had the 13 touches. So I think it's a little bit more of what we like to think rather than the actual substance involved. So it's a no from me. Jack Darling seems to be conducting a fair bit of interest, and I'm surprised to see him only in 3% of sides. I just thought it might be around the 6 or 7. A lot of people are going with him, and I can understand why. The way he started last season and produced that for some time before injury struck, you can see why. He's going to be in one of the best teams of the comp, get beautiful delivery. He's got a scoring history as a junior. There's a lot to like, but again, the inconsistency of a key forward just scares me off, and there's just something about that selection that I just don't love. And we got to take into account the fact that there was a -1 and a 14 in his season last year, which affects his average. But even still, it's not enough to give me confidence to start with him. Moving along, we really get to scroll past a few now. Christian Petracca has moved into 7% of sides, and the opposite to what I was saying last year, I am saying do not pick him. I love him. I absolutely love watching him, and watching him burst out of a stoppage and explode and kick a goal or hit a bloke on the chest is just majestic. But I just don't think we've seen enough. And you'll say, but Shorty had a good JLT. Yeah, he did. But that was not in the position that I think is going to be well for us in the SuperCoach world. Now, last year I was hoping we would see more midfield time. We didn't. I went with him. I thought he would get it. I showed a bit of patience, and we just never got there. We never got there, and I fear more of the same. I would imagine an increase in those numbers of 81, and he has all the abilities to be a bit like that DeGoey type. Now, he's not going to get much midfield time. The D's bat so deep through there. Can he be DeGoey and a touch more and average around the 90s, early 90s? Perhaps, but I'll tell you what, when Petracca's going to move in that midfield, I'll be the first to jump on him. But until then, I'm off. Lycett, 6% of sides. Not sure about this at all. Not sure at all. I'm not sure why he's in 6% of sides. I know Ryder is under some sort of cloud, but surely if they do play in a combination, that's not really what we're after. And I'm just going to divert to a few numbers. I know he's been a guy that we have seemingly felt will be a scorer at some point in time, and he's shown signs, but I just don't think we really want to see him sharing it. 83.2 is his best average in 2016. 81.3 last year, and some really good signs at stages. But even the final series, which he played an integral part, but it was 57, 45, and 60. So it wasn't as if, yeah, he was a key member of the team, but he wasn't dominating personally and individually. So please don't go with him. Jack Billings, 6% of sides. You've just heard me knock a few guys, and you're probably thinking, well, surely he's going to knock Billings. No, I'm going to endorse him. You guys might think I'm crazy, but change of position. He's more up on a wing, winning a high percentage of his touches through the midfield, in between the arcs. I'm telling you, minimum average 90. There you go. Hold me to it. I think minimum average for Billings will be 90. Now, I don't see a big range. I don't see him cracking the ton either. But what I could very likely see is somewhere 93, 94, maybe 96 if we really get going. I don't think I'm going to go with him, but there's a lot to like. Last year, a bit like what happened with Adelaide. I know it's totally different, but we talk about Adelaide having just a write-off of a year, and they'll respond now. I think Billings is the same from an individual sense. Just a shocker. He had no confidence. The team was down. He was copping absolute heat in the media. Look at his back half of the year, and I think he averaged mid-90s there. And I know it's a small sample size, and you've got to be careful, but he did show it. So it's food for thought, absolutely. Making the way further, Gresham in 1% of sides. I feel he was much more popular, or at least in much more of a discussion. Charlie Curnow, 3% of sides. It's too risky for mine. Way too risky. Luke Dahlhaus, 6% of sides. I don't think so. I really don't. I know there's a bit of value there, but he's playing a totally different role. I know we saw a good score in the JLT too. He's going to have high tackle numbers. Geelong have brought him to the club to tackle. We're not going to see him through the midfield. And I know he's never been a pure mid, but we've seen much more midfield time previously as a dog. And what did he average? 98 or something at one point? I don't think it's going to be a totally different Dahlhaus. It's going to be the Dahlhaus who has, 16 to 24 touches and 4 to 10 tackles. Now, when he has 24 and 25 touches and 8 tackles, it's going to be great. But I think there's going to be games where he just doesn't get that involved, and he's getting some pressure acts and things like that. But he's scoring 71. So it's a no from me there. Rory Lobb, 4% of teams. It's a flat out no. I just think there's so much risk. Really nothing to go on in terms of history, or it's all just potential. And I'm not going on potential at 411k. There's better options. Worpel, 11% of sides, clearly provoking a bit of interest, and understandably so. He's looked really good through the JLT. Put his hand up as a guy who's going to benefit from Mitchell's absence. I can see the thought here. I have definitely thought about it. The main thing that's stopped me is that he's a shadow under 400k. That's a lot of money. Hasn't played much football. And that average is 72.9. That's going up big time. Somewhere in the 80s for sure. But at 395, I just, if he's 350 or a bit less, you know, I'm really considering him. But that extra 40 or 50k just worries me. You know, just worries me. And that's the main thing that scared me off. He is a mid-pricer, but he's towards the higher end. Now, obviously, it sounds like I'm, you know, not endorsing as many players, but the fact is, I think the forward line's fairly slim pickings now, and I've only got, you know, 4 or 5 of these guys, so you can't back everyone. And I do feel like the forward line is the toughest to have confidence in players. Now, Toby Greene's in 20% of sides. No, don't do it. It's just far too risky. Far too risky. Look, if he looks great in the first 2 rounds, get him in after that. But, you know, find a way. Maybe even plan for a, in case this happens, we'll get Greene sort of idea if you really like him. But to start with him, after we've seen, what, a half of football? Gee whiz, that's keen, you know. I could not say go with him, and 1 in 5 people are. I think it's madness, you know. This injury has plagued him of late. He just has not been able to get going. So the chance of a reoccurrence is high, and him playing his best football is a very low chance. So I just don't think we should be paying that sort of money. Jaidyn Stephenson is in 4% of teams. And again, I think that's just a little bit of a sexy option. I don't think he's a SuperCoach option at all. He's a very talented player, but I still think he's more impact. I still think he's more your goal out of nothing sort of guy. He doesn't have any quantity about him. You know, of course he'll be up on that 64 last year, but I would not be going with him. If we just scroll through a bit more, this is when it really does start to get a bit low. Cameron Rayner's in 4% of teams. Love him as a future prospect, no doubt. But a bit like Petracca, and they're similar style players. That real sort of hard body, big-bodied player who can go through the middle, and that everyone expects them to at some point. But at the moment, they're playing forward. And until we see more midfield time, and I think Rayner's got a little bit to go in terms of that tank, then we can pounce on him, but not yet. Paddy Dow is in 3% of teams. I am a massive fan of him. Massive fan. I think he just needs to learn to win the uncontested footy a bit more. Has no trouble winning it on the inside, and I think he'll get opportunity to do that in the Blues midfield this year. Didn't really do what we had expected as a high pick last year. Didn't even reach the 60 mark in terms of an average, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that increase of 20 plus, you know, anywhere from 20 to 30. Or not 30, but I think he's capable of averaging around the 80. And at 323, obviously that's why a few of you are going with him, but I wouldn't be out and out saying go with him. Because if it goes pear-shaped, it's going to be very difficult. Willie Riewoldt in 3% of sides. No idea why, but I said I'd mention them if they had a few percent. Don't do that. Nathan Vardy, 5% of sides. Don't do that. I'm not sure what's going on here. There's a few romantics out there, I think. We will be definitely winding up in terms of the options. Aaron Vandenberg, 4% of sides. I'm losing my mind here, and clearly 4% of people are too. What the hell are you doing? I do wonder how that happens. I just don't know. Jamie Elliot in 12% of sides. Clearly people are just getting too worked up in that final JLT. It's great that he's back. It's great that he's looking good. He has broken down that many times. There is no way we could go with him. And he's never been a scorer anyway. You know, let me look. I would guess he's never gone over 85. And I'm happy to be proven wrong here. Let's see. I'm guessing his career best is about 82. He's probably had 1 year that's pipped that. Well, there you go. 2014, 83.2. And then it was 72, 76, 73, and he's missed a lot of footy in between, but yeah, way too risky. Joe Danaher, 3% of sides. Obviously, that's not going to happen anymore. Injury's going to keep him out for a while. Gary Rowan, 3% of sides. Let's not get caught up in that last JLT game. Do not pick him. Lincoln McCarthy, 5% of teams. Again, no thank you. He's been very, very promising as a Lion. He looks very good. Don't get me wrong, but his body has let him down so many times before, and I just don't feel there's room for him in that Brisbane midfield, and I think he's just going to be a really classy, clever, half-forward, forward pocket type who's going to average about 70-odd. I personally don't see why you'd go with him ahead of a rookie. I know we're slim on rookies, but that's an extra 120k you're forking out. I just don't see the point in that. I do see the point in going Darcy Moore. I think this will probably be the last one before we hit the rookies by the looks of things. Yeah, definitely does. But I'm a big fan of Darcy Moore. I'm actually considering bringing him into my side in this final week. Just a couple of things are getting manoeuvred, and he's a chance to come in. I talked about him in the defenders video. Obviously, he's dual position. I really love how he positions himself to be offensive, but also cover off on his man, because he is so athletic. He's quick, he can tackle, and he's beautiful in the air. Really, really good in the air. If I can paint the best case scenario, it's something like James Sicily. Nowhere near those numbers. I think he's going to be a little bit more defensively minded, whereas they just gave the ball to Sicily to be a real ball user. But in terms of safe in the air, taking kick-ins and intercepting, I can see an average in the 80s. And if we could get that at 240k, unbelievable. Paint the worst case scenario, injury gets him again in round 2, and he's scored a 70, and he's gone early in the game for a 44. That's your worst case scenario. It could really hurt. But at 240k, it isn't going to hurt us too bad, I wouldn't have thought. So there is room for movement. And the fact that I think there's not going to be too many forward rookies, that's what it seems like at this point. So given that, we might want to bat a little bit deep to help us not expose some weaker rookies. And by that I mean you might avoid that 40 or a 50 where, you know, we look to have a lot of defenders and midfielders that can be put on the ground. They look, and it's tough to judge, but they look as if they're capable of scoring 70s, maybe 80s, and you never know what else is possible. But a lot of forward line rookies, tough to say whether they're going to even get picked, even tougher to say how they'll score. So maybe Darcy Moore could help beef up that forward line for you. So there you go, guys. There's all the players that I feel are relevant through the forward line. Hopefully it's given you a bit of an insight, and as I always have been doing with these longer style videos this time around, I'll be time stamping them to save you a bit of time and just go bang and find a couple of players you want to hear about. So hopefully that can, be of use to you. Subscribe away. Very, very happy with how it's all been going, and hopefully you've been getting around the channel as well. I've been trying to keep up to date with everything and produce content. It has been fairly busy with a bit of a change in location and lifestyle and things like that. I have had a bit to do, but I've been trying to pump these vids out, and there'll still be a few more to go. I hope you got into one of my leagues. And as I said, I'll be looking into the midfield. I'll be revealing my team soon. And there'll be a bit of draft stuff and things like that coming your way as well. So, as always, thanks. Appreciate your support, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.